brought into the 111th precinct to be charged in this major gang conspiracy case.
This is Antonio Nathaniel Davenport Jr., a.k.a. Lil Tony, and Derek Lamont Dixon Jr., a.k.a. Smack, who are facing charges for murder in Durham, North Carolina. Lil Tony and Smack were members of the notorious 8 Trey Gangsters Crips gang. But they weren't just your regular street thugs. They were involved in many illegal activities, including shootings aimed at rival gang members, drug trafficking, and bank fraud. Davenport even had a gig on the side as part of a rap group called the 83 Babies, named after the 8 Trey Gangster Crips. But their music glorified the gang lifestyle, guns, and drugs. Things took a gruesome turn when rival gang members attacked Davenport at a mall and posted a video of the assault on Instagram.
Take his chain, take his chain! Take his chain! Come on.
Davenport and Dixon teamed up with their gang buddies, including Deval Naiji Magwood, aka Paco, and hatched a plan to strike back. On that fateful day, they drove to an area frequented by their rivals, guns in hand. Zion Person, a 9-year-old boy, innocently sat in his aunt's car with 4 other kids on their way to grab snow cones. But Davenport, Dixon, and Magwood mistakenly identified their car as belonging to a rival gang member, specifically the person Davenport had threatened on Instagram the day before. Without a second thought, they opened fire on the car, spraying it with bullets. The hailstorm of gunfire struck Zion in the head, tragically taking his life and wounding his 8-year-old cousin.
Just a little bit more than 3 years ago, that 9-year-old Zion Person was shot and killed near this intersection here in Durham.
The authorities had their eyes on Davenport, quite literally, because he was wearing a court-ordered ankle monitor due to pending domestic violence charges. The evidence was stacked against him. Location data placing him at the murder scene, surveillance footage capturing his car tailing the victim's vehicle, and even a handgun linked to the crime.
Mr. Davenport, you are charged with first-degree murder of Zion Person on August 18, 2019, felony conspiracy to commit that murder.
As if their crimes were not terrible enough, the reaction in court will shock you. During the trial, Dixon pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit racketeering and murder. As for Davenport, he was found guilty of murder and discharging a firearm during a violent crime. They were slapped with life imprisonment. They showed no signs of remorse. For many, Dixon and Davenport got what they deserved. However, this wasn't the only time a gangster got a sentence that felt like justice. There was the case of Denzel Guarant. This is Sean Denzel Guarant, who's facing multiple charges, including conspiracy to commit murder in Roanoke, Virginia. Guarant was the former leader of the Rollin' 30s Crips gang in Roanoke, and he was no stranger to trouble. Guarant, also known as Harlem Dunk, and his fellow conspirators were part of the Rollin' 30s Crips gang, which also called itself the Dirt Gang. In early June 2017, Trayvon Raycron Casey drove another gang member to commit a crime. Another rival gang followed them, and things took a bad turn before long. Mac, a Rollin' 30s Crip gang member, chased the other rival gang member down and fatally shot him twice in the back. 30-year-old Guarant pleaded guilty to a racketeering conspiracy charge that involved murder and another conspiracy to commit homicide. He was also involved in a whole pattern of shady activities, including threats and violent acts. His gang made a 17-year-old kill someone as a twisted way to make up for gang violations and disloyalty.
A former gang leader in Roanoke is facing a life sentence in prison. Prosecutors say Sean Garant pled guilty to several federal charges. He admitted that he and 3 others were involved in multiple threats and acts of violence, including the 2017 murder of a 17-year-old. The men were members of the Rollin' 30s gang, which operated out of a house in the Lansdowne neighborhood.
Guarant is behind bars on state charges for fleeing arrest and looting. He agreed to serve those sentences alongside the 37-year sentence he'll receive for his guilty plea. Considering he's 30, he won't be eligible for parole until he's a ripe old age of 67. Guarant showed no remorse for his actions. However, some convicts go out of their way to try to make amends, like in the case of Stanley Williams. This is Stanley "Tookie" Williams, the notorious gangster who skyrocketed to infamy as the co-founder of the notorious Crips gang. Born on December 29, 1953 in New Orleans, Louisiana, Tookie's life took a turn for the wild when he migrated to the mean streets of Los Angeles at a tender age. Growing up in the vibrant yet crumbling South Central neighborhood, Tookie quickly realized that the streets held more allure than his humble abode. At age 6, he ventured out, ready to take on the neighborhood bullies and stake his claim. Surrounded by violence, drugs, and a lack of parental guidance, Tookie idolized criminals and took up a penchant for emulating pimps and drug dealers. This kid had a bizarre job watering, feeding, and patching up dogs ravaged in illegal dogfights. Skipping school became Tookie's thing, as he believed the streets held more valuable lessons than any classroom ever could. He strutted, relying on his fists to make friends and line his pockets. The man's reputation as a bootblack and thief grew, and it was during this time that he met his partner in crime, Raymond Washington. In 1969, they joined forces and gave birth to the Crips, a gang initially formed to protect their neighborhood from rival groups. But, like any good story, things took a dark twist. In 1979, Raymond was tragically shot and killed, sparking a brutal war among the Crips factions. And it didn't stop there. That same year, Tookie and 3 other gang members, fueled by PCP-laced cigarettes, committed a heinous crime. They robbed a convenience store, leaving 26-year-old Albert Owens dead with 2 shots to the back. $120 richer, they callously walked away. Tookie allegedly broke into the Brookhaven Motel office and took the lives of 3 members of a Taiwanese family. In 1981, Tookie stood trial and was found guilty of all 4 murders, along with 2 counts of robbery. He was sentenced to death and sent to San Quentin State Prison. However, after a couple years on death row, something remarkable happened. Tookie began reevaluating his life choices, seeking redemption and making amends. He found solace in his newfound spirituality and became an outspoken advocate against gang violence.
Working together, we can put an end to this cycle that creates deep pain in the hearts of our mothers, our fathers, and our people who have lost loved ones to this senseless violence.
Writing books to discourage gang violence, the former gangster turned over a new leaf and wanted to guide others away from the path he had walked. He garnered support from unlikely quarters. Members of the Swiss parliament even nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize 6 times. Tookie's plea for clemency was met with mixed reactions, but the appeals failed. On December 13, 2005, he was executed by lethal injection, leaving behind a legacy that remains fiercely debated to this day. Tookie may have used his last days to push for change and become a new person. However, not every gangster shares such ideas, and definitely not Antonio Simmons. This is Antonio Murdoch Simmons, the self-proclaimed kingpin of the 9 Trey Gangsters Bloods gang, who's facing charges for murder in Norfolk, Virginia. December 2015 was nothing short of a horror movie. 5 people were shot dead, and 4 others were shot in 7 separate shootings across nearly every city in Southampton roads. These guys didn't discriminate. Most victims had 0 affiliation with the gang. 2 mothers and a grandmother, tragically killed alongside her boyfriend, got caught in the crossfire. All this because the gang believed she was snitching to the cops about another shooting. Antonio was found guilty of 2 murders during the robberies he orchestrated. As if that wasn't enough, 2 of his crew members, Anthony Foyer, aka Ace, and Nathaniel Mitchell, aka Savage, were in a twisted competition to see who could shoot the most people. Mitchell even gunned down a woman who was innocently walking home from her job at the airport 4 days before Christmas. The evidence showed that Antonio proudly boasted about the shootings carried out by his trigger-happy buddies. Things took a truly sinister turn when Antonio ordered his crew to take out high-ranking members of a rival gang. When they couldn't find their intended targets, they went for the next best thing, a man at his house. But here's the shocking part. When a woman opened the door and said their target wasn't home, they shot her 6 times. Luckily, thanks to the quick response from local EMTs and the Portsmouth Police Department, she survived. But that didn't stop these thugs from firing at witnesses before fleeing the scene. After robbing a gas station, Foye and Mitchell were arrested later that night. After a grueling 7-week trial, Antonio, Mitchell, and their cohorts were convicted on all counts. Antonio, aka Murdoch and Doc, was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 60 years on his plate. Mitchell, aka Savage, got hit with 5 life sentences plus 50 years. Foye, aka Ace and Bull, will be locked up for life. They remained unemotional as their sentences were handed to them. However gruesome you think Antonio's case was, it can't be compared to the case of Dimitris Devine. This is Dimitris R. Devine. Dimitris R. Devine was the leader or godfather of not just one, but multiple notorious gangs. We're talking about the Gangsta Killer Bloods, GKB, the Black Mob Gangstas, BMG, and the Donald Gee family, DGF. These gangs didn't just hang out on street corners exchanging pleasantries with passers-by. They were knee-deep in criminal activities. We're talking racketeering, murder, drug distribution, witness tampering. You name it, they did it. They were a force to be reckoned with, instilling fear in the hearts of their rivals and Raleigh's law-abiding citizens. As the leader, Dimitris had a hand in it all. He ordered the shooting of a 16-year-old rival gang member, resulting in the young boy's tragic death. Dimitris wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty either. He participated in gang initiations, even dishing out beatings to those he deemed disloyal. And when gang members were subpoenaed to testify in a federal proceeding, he conspired to silence and threaten them.
The violent pursuit of power, money, respect, words permanently inscribed on Devine's neck through a tattoo, defined the gangstas. Violence was endemic from the moment of initiation, which often required a savage baptism into gang life, during which existing members attacked aspiring members while chanting, 31 seconds to be born blood.
Justice finally caught up with Dimitris R. Devine. After a 2-week jury trial, he was found guilty on multiple charges, including conspiracy to participate in racketeering, murder in aid of racketeering, murder with a firearm, drug distribution, and witness tampering. Dimitris was sentenced to not 1, not 2, but 4 consecutive life sentences, followed by an additional 240 months of imprisonment. Dimitris's behavior and reactions may have been caused by the horrible environment he grew up in. However, not every gang member grew up in such an environment, like in the case of Anthony Zottola. This is Anthony Zottola.
Guilty, conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty, murder for hire. Guilty, discharging of a firearm, even though he didn't pull the trigger. And guilty for causing death with a firearm and causing serious physical injury to his brother Salvatore, who survived 5 gunshots back in July 2018.
Who's facing charges for murder in New York. Sylvester Zottola was a real estate tycoon with a not-so-loving son. This family saga turned dark on October 4th, 2018, when Anthony and his partner in crime, Hyman Ross,
he is a Bloods gang member. Now, prosecutors convinced the jury that Anthony Zottola did indeed hire the Bloods gang to kill his father.
Hired a gang of hitmen to kill his father and brother, Salvatore.
Was it hard to see your brother convicted of this?
It's never easy.
Anthony had his eyes set on the family's multi-million-dollar real estate empire, and he was willing to go to extreme lengths to make it happen. The hitmen, led by co-conspirator Bouchon Shelton.
Sean Shelton, who had a day job, was arrested within a week.
Embarked on a year-long spree of violence against Sylvester and Salvatore Zottola. They stalked, beat, and stabbed Sylvester, leaving him in constant fear without knowing who was behind the attacks. But the Zottola family proved resilient. Sylvester survived a brutal home invasion where he was struck in the head, stabbed multiple times, and even had his throat slashed. These guys were ruthless, but Sylvester fought to stay alive. In another chilling incident, Salvatore was shot in the head, chest, and hand right in front of his residence. Miraculously, he managed to survive the assassination attempt. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. Ross, one of the key players in this sinister plot, tracked Sylvester Zottola to a McDonald's drive-thru in the Bronx. With precision and cold-heartedness, he fired multiple shots, ending Sylvester's life. The hit was executed flawlessly, leaving no room for doubt about Anthony's involvement. Fast forward to the trial, and the jury didn't buy Anthony's twisted narrative. They found him and Ross guilty of murder for hire, conspiracy to commit murder for hire, and firearms offenses. Justice was served, and they were slapped with mandatory life imprisonment, plus an eye-popping 112 years. If you thought these reactions were shocking, you'd be amazed at this video of killers begging for forgiveness in court.